Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am, of course, your host, John Campea, and as always, it is an honor and a privilege to have you guys joining me here today for this. Finally, it's here. The Star Wars The Last Jedi spoiler review and open discussion. We are here to talk about Star Wars The Last Jedi in all of its spoilery goodness. Now, a bunch of people have been asking me, John, everybody else put out their spoiler reviews on Thursday and Friday. Why do you wait till Sunday? Because I wanted this not just to be me sitting here telling you about my spoiler review. I wanted this to be interactive. I wanted to hear from you guys and make this a discussion. And in order to do that, I wanted to make sure most of you guys had the chance to see the movie. So that meant giving you Thursday, Friday, and Saturday to see the movie. And now here we are on Sunday. Most of you guys have seen the movie. Clearly, it goes without saying, if you have not yet seen Star Wars The Last Jedi and don't want to be spoiled, what the hell are you doing here? Turn this off right now. Go watch one of my other videos. Watch 10 of my other videos, as a matter of fact. But don't watch this yet. Come back and watch it after you've seen Star Wars The Last Jedi. Whole bunch of stuff to talk about. A lot of people different. I mean, so much happens in this movie. And by the way, did you see... It exceeded all expectations of the box office. The official opening weekend box office number right now is at $220 million, making it the largest film opening in history not called Star Wars. It's only the second all-time, just behind Star Wars The Force Awakens, which I've been saying all year is what was going to happen. And lo and behold, there you go, it happened. So here's how I want today to go. I really mostly want this to be interactive. So I'm going to spend about 5-10 minutes maybe talking about Star Wars The Last Jedi from my point of view. And then what I want to do is get into your questions that you guys are sending in and just kind of riff off that and give you my points of view from the different points that you guys want to bring up. And that's that. Now, important to understand when we're talking about any movie, but especially Star Wars The Last Jedi, is the point as fans is not to all have the same opinion. That's not the point here. I don't want you guys to just agree with me. I certainly don't want you guys to just agree with me. I want us to exchange different ideas and have different points of view. I'm going to be presenting you with my points of view, but much like Obi-Wan would say, that doesn't mean mine is the only point of view. I'm just presenting you with my point of view. There will be other points of view that are every bit as valid as mine, but I'm the only one here, so I'm going to be giving you my opinion, and you guys are going to be sending me in your questions and things like that. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get started with this. Let's start with my first tweet that I sent out about Star Wars The Last Jedi. My first tweet that I sent out about Star Wars The Last Jedi is when I walked out of the premiere, I came out of the screening, I said, I really liked it. I did not like Finn and Rose's storyline. I did not like the Benicio del Toro character, but I pretty much loved everything else. And that really does sum up my feelings of Star Wars The Last Jedi. And then I saw it again and again, and I think my appreciation for the movie has gone up with every screening that I've seen of it. So that's my general opinion. Let me start with a couple things. There's several of my predictions about Star Wars The Last Jedi came true. One significant one was dead wrong. Let me start with the one that I was dead wrong on. I did not think either a Force Obi-Wan or a Force Ghost Yoda would show up in the movie. My prediction was that wouldn't happen. And then lo and behold, that scene happens. And I don't know about you, but the theaters I was in when this happened, the place went nuts. As Luke is walking up to that tree where the little library is, and the camera pans around from behind, and you get from the back of Yoda, place went nuts. And I'm like, well, I was wrong about that because I didn't think he was going to show up. And did you notice as well, they used Puppet Yoda for that? They used Puppet Yoda, which I thought was a really interesting choice, and I know a choice a lot of people were really happy about. And I love that scene. That shot, actually, I remember leaning over to Anne and saying that shot when Luke and Yoda were just laying there, the camera shot was behind them. So the camera's behind Luke and Yoda looking at the big tree on fire. I'm like, I want that poster on my wall because that poster was amazing. I love that poster. So I was dead wrong about that one particular prediction. My other key predictions all pretty much came true. I've been saying since The Force Awakens came out and nobody would listen to me. Rey's parents are going to be nobody. They're going to be nobody of consequence. And everybody's like, no, Johnny, she's going to be a Skywalker. No. And if I said before too, if she was connected to anybody, out of all the Rey theories, the one I would have given the most credence to was the Obi-Wan one. Like I still said, I still think her parents are nobody. But if one of these theories is true, I'll go with the granddaughter of Obi-Wan thing. I never bought into the Palpatine theory. I absolutely never bought into the she's a Skywalker theory. Like, I remember making a video saying The Force Awakens makes it 100% clear that she is not a Skywalker. The Force Awakens made that abundantly clear. So I really never understood why anybody thought she was a Skywalker. I thought all of the information that was absolutely 100% required for us to know that her parents were not Skywalkers was in that movie. But a lot of people still believed it. And a lot of people asked me, what was the big spoiler that I knew? What was the big spoiler that I knew? The big spoiler that I knew was that Snoke died. I found that out through somebody I knew connected to the film a long, long time ago. And that one was obviously there. I kind of went into the film wondering, will this be in here? And sure enough, it was in there. And there's no way anybody saw that coming because everybody, I mean, they set it up to make us assume that Snoke was going to be the bad guy right through the new trilogy, all the way through to the end of episode 9. And lo and behold, he dies in it, which kind of changes a lot of things, right? Obviously, it changes a lot of things. So let me focus for a second here on the things I did not like so much about the film. And then, like I said, I want to spend most of today taking your questions. The main way to get your point or question on this broadcast is using the Super Chats. If we still have time at the end, I'll take some questions via Twitter as well. So you can start sending those in. Let me really focus on this. And I really did not like this part of the film at all. Was in Finn's entire storyline. I love the character Finn. And I love what John Boyega brings to him. I love the new character Rose, and I love what Michelle Kelly Tran brings to that character as well. But the side mission they went on, some people are mad because that side mission didn't work. Well, that's not why I don't like it. I mean, I like it when heroes go on quests that don't work out. I think that's ballsy. I have no problem with that. I just didn't like what it was they were doing in the first place. Like, first of all, their whole storyline starts with Maz Kanata. It's like, wait a minute, why is Poe reaching out to Maz? Poe doesn't even know Maz Kanata. Why is Poe reaching out to Maz Kanata? And she's like, find the guy at the table with the red balloon. It's like, how does she know that maybe he's off with a space hooker? Maybe he's hanging out with space hookers at the time that Rose and Finn show up at that planet. How does she know at that particular moment that they arrive, he'll be sitting there at the gaming table? Why not just give them his name? That whole thing with Maz was so shoehorned in and so forced. Forced. No pun intended. They did not need that scene in this movie whatsoever. That was so forced. And Finn met her once. And yet in the moments of their deepest need, they're reaching out to Maz Kanata? That made no sense. Poe had never met her. Finn met her once. Rose has no idea who this person is, and yet they're giving her a phone call. To me, first of all, how do they even have her number? So I'm not even sure about that. Anyway, let's move on from there. So then they go off on this wild goose, and then I think the part about this mission that really, really bothered me was the whole, what is the, Canto Bight? Is that the name of the world, the casino world they end up on, Las Vegas? It felt so much like the prequels to me. It really did. And I know Anne loved that little alien, that drunk little alien with the monocle putting coins in BB-8. And granted, a lot of people in the theater laughed at it. I didn't like it. I thought that was kind of lame. I know there are people who really like that. But the whole thing, and then the whole horse race thing, like jumping on those animals, I get it. You wanted an action beat. But that felt totally unnecessary, totally thrown in there. Now, granted, they use that whole thing to set up the little kid who does a big message payoff at the end. And I got to admit, I liked that. I did. I like the kid reaching for the broom flying in, indicating that the Force lives. The Force still is actively at work throughout the universe. And the light side is still sowing seeds of hope. As children, as all Jedi, I kept trying to explain this to people. The guy say, Rey is not a Skywalker, and people go, well, then how else does she have the Force? The same way all Jedi throughout thousands of millennia have had the Force. They're just born connected to the Force. And then the Jedis discover them and bring them to the temple and then train them as Jedis. That's how. But anyway, Rian Johnson ends this movie kind of showcasing that at the same time and showing us that the Force lives and the Force is still at work and the light side is still sowing seeds throughout the galaxy with a new generation of Force users. And I did like that callback at the end. I did. But to use that entire Canto Bight thing. And it's like, really? The big thing that the bad guys on the planet are after Finn and Rose for is a freaking parking infraction? Really? You couldn't have come up with something better than that? So that also bothered me. And then to compound all that, the Benicio del Toro character, who I've been really looking forward to, I thought was just a waste. I really did. When you get an actor of the caliber of Benicio del Toro, it doesn't mean, just because you get him in doesn't mean you have to give him the most important character in the movie. I just found the character was pointless. Other than playing a minor narrative tool in helping them get off the planet, that really was it. I mean, I think it probably would have been flowed better if they went to that planet, Benicio del Toro was the master code breaker they had to find, and yada, 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 and all that kind of stuff. That would have been fine too. But I just don't get how that all works. Also, how the hell did Benicio del Toro's character know that the plan was to sneak the shuttles cloaked off the ship? Even Poe didn't know that till the last minute. So if I'm not mistaken, maybe I'm not remembering this correctly, but there's no way Finn or Rose knew it to tell Benicio del Toro it for him to then tell the Empire or the First Order that. So that made no sense to me whatsoever. Basically, everything, unfortunately, until they show up at the old Rebel base, because once they got to the old Rebel base, I thought Finn and Rose were much more relevant once they got to the base with everybody else. But that whole Canto Bight, or however you pronounce the damn thing, sequence, which took up a lot of the movie, to me was a total waste. And to me, that is the biggest negative thing about this movie, to me. Now, maybe for some of you, you love those scenes, and that's great if you did. Maybe some of you, you hated it more than me, and that's totally fine too. But that's the thing, the big problem to me. Just about everything else I loved. I loved what they did with Luke Skywalker, which is a great example about why we should never go into a film predetermined what the character should and shouldn't do. Because you know what I wanted out of Luke, right? I want to see Luke light up that lightsaber, take out a whole bunch of fools. I wanted to see Luke live into Episode 9. Because I also thought Luke would make it into Episode 9. Obviously, he's going to show up as a Force ghost, but still, I thought Luke alive would make it into Episode 9. But none of that happened, and yet I loved what they did with Luke. The fact that, oh, thank God, because the temptation would have been there for a lesser filmmaker to say, yeah, 30 years have passed, but Luke Skywalker is exactly the same. I'm sure a lesser filmmaker probably would have felt the temptation to do that. Instead, Rian Johnson understands Luke has been through the ringer. He has been through an insanely traumatic event of realizing this, what he thought was his goal in life, reestablish the Jedi Order, taking on the son of his sister Leia, and to be totally failure at it. To have them turn to the dark side, to be the seed that launched the First Order, blah, 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 and ultimately leading him to believing the best thing for the galaxy is for him to hide himself away off on the island. I loved that. I know there were some people who weren't happy with that because they wanted the same Luke Skywalker that we always had from 30 years ago. I get it. That's fine. Nothing wrong with wanting that. There was a part of me that wanted that too. But I love that Rian Johnson said, we are going to boldly do something different. We are going to say Luke has been through hell and back. And as a result, you go through hell and back over the course of 30 years, you are changed. And I love that he had the balls to do it. And I ultimately loved what they did with Luke. Particularly, and this is the last thing I'll mention before I go over to your comments, because I want this to be an interactive thing. Particularly, I wanted Luke to have a big lightsaber duel. That's what I wanted. And I didn't get it. And I loved it even more. Because what Kylo does, and I missed this the first time I saw the film, but I caught it the second time. Kylo has that discussion with Rey. When Rey's saying, I'm not the one doing this, and Kylo goes, well, I know that because even just trying this would kill you. Like, even attempting something like that in the Force would probably kill her or kill Kylo trying it. And we all know how powerful those two are. But it would kill them to even try it. And yet Luke, he is the man. Luke is the only Force user alive, more powerful than Snoke, clearly way more powerful than Kylo and Rey, because he has so powerful in the Force that he can actually project not just himself. Like, remember, Snoke was only powerful enough to make Kylo just barely see Rey, but not see her around surroundings and stuff like that. So he was able to pull that off. Luke, full-blown, projected himself across the galaxy, made everybody totally convinced, even his own sister, that he was physically there, and do all of that before finally it took his life and it killed him. And I love the way they did that. It took one of the most powerful examples of a powerful Force user ever in Star Wars mythology to end that movie off and do it with Luke. And I loved it. I just absolutely ate it up. I loved it. I adored that. Like, completely adored that. And it was Luke showing who's the man. Luke Skywalker's the man. Because he did something only he could have done. Only somebody who is arguably the most powerful Force user ever to live was able to do. And I loved it. I ate that up. Anyway, guys, there is, I'm sure, a lot of stuff that you guys want to talk about and points you want to make. Again, though, just want to say it. Luke Skywalker, he's the man. He is the man. He was not anything that I was hoping he would do, but he ended up being everything I wanted him to be. And that's because Rian Johnson had the balls to color way outside the lines, and I love that part, myself personally. I know some people had some issues with it, and that's fine. So, with that, we got a lot of stuff to get to here, guys. We have a lot of you guys firing in stuff, so let's get rolling with this. The first question we're going to take today comes to us from Skynet BMS, who writes, whose idea was it to kill Luke Skywalker right after killing Han Solo in The Force Awakens? Look, I think we all knew when Han died in The Force Awakens, I think most of us realized that in this new trilogy, one of the original three was probably going to die in each film. We knew that. Clearly their plan was for part one to be mostly, as far as the original trilogy characters, part one was mostly going to be focus on Han. Part two was mostly going to focus on Luke. Part three mostly focus on Leia. Now, how they're going to do that with Leia now, I have no idea. But they followed through with it. They resisted the temptation. Do some reshoots and just have Leia die in episode 8. And they didn't do that. So I am holding out hope that they're going to recast Leia. You guys know, if you watch me for any period of time, you know that I feel that the only way to honor Carrie Fisher, honor everything Carrie Fisher has done for us as Star Wars fans, honor everything that Carrie Fisher has done by bringing us Leia and helping make that character who she is, the only way to honor her is to say, we've got your back, Carrie. We'll pick up the ball for you and carry it across the finish line for you. We will recast the role of Leia and complete your destiny. We will complete your legacy. Don't worry, don't worry, Carrie. We're not going to let Leia be forgotten. All that work you put into her, we are going to carry it through in your name. We will recast the role and finish it off. Anything else, I believe, is a disservice and disrespect to Carrie Fisher. That's my belief. And look, and I have no arguments with people who think otherwise, because I know all of you who think differently than me, your motivation is wanting to honor Carrie. You just think honoring Carrie means something different. So you and me, we have no problems with each other. That's fine. I totally believe to not recast Leia is a disrespect to Carrie and her legacy as Leia and everything she brought to Leia if we don't cover her back and carry it across the finish line for her now that she can't. But anyway, that's just my theory. But it does give me a little bit of hope, because I had given up on the idea that they were going to recast Leia for episode 9. Now I have some hope that maybe they will. But anyway, that's just my thought. Tyler Bruno writes in, I love that this movie takes everything familiar about Star Wars and presents it through new and unique lens. I agree with you. Now, granted, some of the things look, whenever you take risks, that means some things aren't going to work. They took a risk with some of the stuff Rose didn't work for me. They took a risk with some of the stuff that Finn did not work for me. They took a risk with what they were doing with the Benicio del Toro character, did not work for me. There was a bunch of things that did not work for me. Overall, though, I think more of the risks paid off than didn't, and I ended up loving the film, but that does not take away that there are some problems. But look, if we're going to ask our filmmakers to take risks, then we got to be prepared that some of the things they roll the dice on will not work. And that's part of taking risks. That's part of taking risks. Or they could just go the safe route and do The Force Awakens, which I love The Force Awakens, but then a lot of people complained about The Force Awakens saying, oh, I played it too safe. It just repeated the first movie. And now that they take a lot of risks, it's too different or whatever. But I mean, everybody has their own reasons for liking or not liking The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi, and that's totally cool and it's totally fine. But whenever we ask our filmmakers to take risks, that means not everything is going to work. Anyway, let's move on here. Sadi Saladuddin writes, "Hey John, I saw the movie at Ancaster last night. My favorite movie theater. It's not the best movie theater. The Ancaster Silver City in Ancaster, Ontario, connected to Hamilton, Ontario, is my home movie theater. And I miss it dearly. Hey John, I saw at Ancaster last night. To me, one of the most interesting things about the movie was Kylo Ren's arc. What a villain. Your thoughts?" I loved... While I'll talk a lot about that, I didn't like Rose and Finn's stuff. I loved Kylo and Rey's stuff. I loved it. They added more layers to Kylo. He is still an emotionally unbalanced dude. I ate it up. I loved everything about the whole Kylo Rey thing. Their connection through the Force, even though it was secretly being orchestrated by Snoke to trap her and to bring out the truth in Kylo. I loved it. I thought it was genius the way they did that. Thanks a lot, man. Okay, Ryan Fenley writes, why is no one talking about Finn's sacrifice? If you're talking about him being willing to pilot himself into the canon to try to take the canon out, I've heard people talking about it. I mean, look, ultimately, here's the truth. Ultimately, the only reason that canon was there was because Finn snuck away in an escape pod to go and find Rey himself, or to go and find the code breaker. If Rose and Finn with Benicio del Toro never ended up on that Star Destroyer, then the First Order never would have known about the Resistance's real plan about sneaking off in the shuttles cloaked down to the planet, and everything would have been fine. So we see Finn, I think, partially taking responsibility for that and being willing to sacrifice himself to make up for his mistakes. And I also do find it kind of funny that there was a bunch of people online, one person in particular, that was complaining a lot about The Force Awakens, saying, Rey's a Mary Sue. It's like, you obviously weren't paying attention to the character. If you thought Rey was a Mary Sue, you were not paying attention to the character. But saying, Rey's a Mary Sue. And yet these same people are now complaining, these characters made mistakes and have flaws. Which one do you want? Do you want them to make mistakes and flaws, or do you want them to be perfect? You can't have them both. One of the things I loved about this movie was that their hero characters showed flaws and made mistakes and had lapses in judgment, and that they had to suffer consequences as a result of their mistakes and their lacks in judgments and because of their flaws. I loved that. And hey, that didn't work for everybody. Some people see those mistakes, lapses in judgment and character flaws and don't like that. They don't want that in their Star Wars characters. Totally fine. That's fine. If that's what works for you, great. For me personally, that was a plus to this movie. I love that Rian Johnson had the balls to show our heroes making flagrant mistakes and there being repercussions and consequences of those mistakes, yet being heroic and heroes at the same time. I loved it because it was more true to life to me. And we're talking about a Star Wars movie. Anyway, that's just my thought. Okay, Nicholas Glenn writes in, at the end, over the comms, in comes Red 5 here. Looks like you guys could use some help. And Luke in that X-Wing helps the escaping ships and kicks ass. Well, there were no escaping ships left. But I'm not going to lie to you, Nicholas. What the little picture you're painting sounds pretty damn good to me. I mean, we all knew Luke was going to show up one way or another at the end. At the end, I loved the way he did it. But the way you're explaining it, like that's happening, and all of a sudden, because the Millennium Falcon's already there, Chewie's in there saving the day, and then out of nowhere, in comes this X-Wing, and it's Luke in his X-Wing, and he starts ripping TIE fighters apart and taking down the walkers. Oh, and how great would it have been if he landed his walker too, and then got out and like lightsabered out the legs of a walker. Oh! I'm getting a semi just thinking about it. It's actually getting me very excited. That also would have worked brilliantly. I would have been all for that too. Okay, James Hatfield writes, watched you for years and respect your opinion, but feel you give a bit of a fan service to your review. Can you please address The Last Jedi plot holes? There are no plot holes. There are no plot holes. At least certainly no obvious plot holes. There are things about the movie that do not work for me. There are a couple of character arcs that they tried that do not work for me. There are a couple of like forced in little cameo things, like the Maz Kanata thing that made no sense. Sending them in for this, but honestly, as far as plot holes go, I have not seen anybody raise up that's a legit plot hole that I agree that it was a plot hole. There are things that didn't work for you and you thought was a bad idea. That's totally cool, but don't necessarily call those plot holes. Honestly, I didn't see any plot holes per se. I saw things done wrong. I saw things I didn't like, but I didn't see any plot holes. Remember, some people want to say to me, as idiots will, say, John, you're just saying that because you love Star Wars. You clearly haven't watched me very much, because I trash on the prequels all the time. I don't like Clone Wars. I gave up on reviewing Rebels. I mean, I like this this final season. I've been liking it. I have been liking it. But back when I was working at that other company I used to work at, I stopped doing the Rebels reviews because I was giving up on the show. I am not immune to being very critical of Star Wars and the Star Wars universe and the Star Wars shows and the Star Wars movies when I feel it deserves it, from my own personal subjective point of view. And sorry, my subjective point of view is that I thought this movie was great with some major flaws. But overall, I thought the movie was great. I'm not being fan servicey. Please don't make excuses for why my opinion is different than yours. That's beneath you. And if you see things as plot holes, that's perfectly fine. I'm just telling you, everything I've seen that people say is a plot hole is really just a thing you didn't like about the movie, but isn't necessarily a plot hole. Not to say there aren't any plot holes. I just haven't seen anybody bring them to me yet that I agree with are plot holes. But again, all film subjective. Thanks a lot for the comment, James. Appreciate that. Speaking of James, another James. James Court writes, I don't feel Chewie was used well enough. Not much screen time. He's a smart guy that has been through a lot and probably has a lot of wisdom to offer. Well, I don't disagree with you there, but I mean, look, to give Chewie more screen time means taking away screen time from other people. And like, Chewie got to be the big hero. Like, really, don't forget, when the Falcon comes rolling in, yeah, Rey's at the guns, but that's Chewie piloting the Falcon. When he saves the Resistance from getting wiped out when they were making that run on the Walkers. It's Chewie that saved them all. So, and again, I think they used him enough. Would I have liked to see a little more Chewie? You know what? I'll say this. Take away some of the time from that Canto Bight, or whatever the casino planet is called. Take some time away from that and give an extra scene or two to Chewie. I would have been on board for that. So I'll be on board with you there. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more screen time for Chewie, but I didn't walk away from the movie feeling like Chewie got shortchanged. You know what I mean? Could he have had more? Yeah. Would I have preferred him to get more time over that casino world thing? Yeah. But when I walked out, every time that I've seen the movie, I never personally thought that Chewie was shortchanged, but I can see why you would feel that way completely. All right. Amin Majayikaki. I'm brutalizing your name, man. I'm totally sorry about that. What was better, Rogue One Vader scene or the Last Jedi throne room scene? I'll go Rogue One Vader scene. Like, I like the Last Jedi more than Rogue One, but I like Rogue One very much. But that Vader scene, I mean, come on. That Vader scene might be my second favorite scene in any Star Wars movie. My first favorite scene is actually my favorite scene in any movie, period, which is the Emperor's throne room with the battle between Luke and Vader. That will forever always probably be my all-time favorite movie scene, not just Star Wars scene. But if I had to compare, but that Vader scene in Rogue One will probably rank right up there. Like, probably rank right up there for me. So, anyway, there's that. Okay, let's move on here. Ben Rayner writes, over or under 40% Luke comes back as a Force ghost in episode 9. Oh my God, I'm not just taking the over. I'm taking the way over. If you set the over under at 90%, I'm taking the over. I would say there's like a 95% chance that Mark Hamill is back in episode 9 as a Force ghost. I think he has more to teach Rey. I think Yoda convinced him of that. Yoda didn't just convince him to go and save her. He didn't want him to lose her. So I think absolutely we're going to see that. I feel very, very strongly about that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they have something else in mind. Neither Mark Hamill nor Nathan Hamill have told me anything about that, so I don't have any insider knowledge. But I totally believe that we are going to see Luke back in episode 9 as a Force ghost. Completely. What do you guys think? You think he's going to come back as a Force ghost? I think it's a no-brainer, but who knows? Curtis Lopez writes in, Porgs, oh, those crystal foxes for pets. Porgs. Crystal foxes, they could make a mess, I think. Porgs, I got to admit, I thought the Porgs could be totally dumb. I really liked them. I did. I thought they could have overused them to get little cheap laughs, but they used them just a couple of times, had a couple of good laughs. They were very cute. I like the Porgs. What can I say? And my wife is now, everything that she's buying is Porg related. Like everything, she's wearing pants and shirts at the screening that are Porgs. She loves them. So there you go. Ben Rayner writes, do you like how Luke went out at the end? Again, not how I would have picked it. That's not how I would have wanted him to go out at the end. But by the time that movie ended, I'm like, wow. And I was very sad to see him die, but I'm supposed to feel sad to see him die. The fact that he died as the most powerful Force user ever, doing the most powerful demonstration of Force ability in the history of the universe, and then finally falling, exhausting, and dying as a result, it was a heroic death. I loved it. I at the end, it's not how I would, going into the movie, it's not how I would have wanted it. But then watching how the movie did it, it totally got me on board with it. Not all of you agree, which is totally fine, but it worked for me. Let's see. Ben writes, did you like Rey's dark side cave mirror? I did. But I think if it went on another 2 or 3 minutes, I would have gotten tired of it, but I thought it was very quick. It was her version of the cave that Luke had to go down into Dagobah, and I like that it was a little bit different. I think people would have really complained if she went down there, saw Kylo Ren, fought him, cut off Kylo Ren's head, and then Kylo Ren's mask pops off and it's her face underneath. I think that would have pissed a lot of people off if that had happened. And I was afraid when we first see that cave on the island, I was a little bit nervous that that's what they were going to do, that she was going to go down into the cave and have the exact same experience that Luke had on Dagobah. But instead they did something completely different with it because she had her own fears and weaknesses to confront. And those being, ever since she was a child, like most orphans, believing her parents really do want her and that her parents will come back because her parents love her and they'll come back. My parents didn't abandon me. And that was her deepest rooted fear and anxiety. And of course it is. It's defined her whole life. And for that to be the thing that the dark side would throw at her as the roots of her deepest fear, I thought was brilliant. I really did. By the end of it, I thought it was a really good move for them to do. But I'm also glad they didn't spend too much time on it. Much like they didn't spend much time on Luke in the Dagobah cave either. They went in there, happens in a minute, and they're out. So I was glad about that. Dave A. Covey writes, I like The Last Jedi overall, but similar to Age of Ultron, it felt very different in tone / style / feel from its trailer. So watching it was jarring. Your thoughts? That's interesting. I'll be honest, Dave, I haven't heard anybody else say that they felt the feel of it was different from the trailer. If anything, remember I was saying going into it, I thought there was a lot of misdirection in the trailers. Turns out there wasn't all that much misdirection in the trailers. Pretty much the trailers were pretty much what we saw was what we got for the most part. So I'll be honest with you. I thought the movie was very much in tone with the trailers. You're the first guy I've heard say that, but I haven't really thought about it since then. It's an interesting point. You know what? I'm going to go back and watch the trailers again and see what I think about it afterwards. So it's an interesting thing you're bringing up. All right, next one comes to us from Nicholas Glenn, who writes, the dialogue between the pilots during Yavin / Hoth / Endor feels like they are in a serious battle. In The Last Jedi, it's like little kids playing a video game having fun. Your thoughts? I don't know about that. I don't know. First of all, I didn't think the chatter between the pilots was all that bad in this one, but I also think the chatter between the pilots, except for Gold Leader in like the original Star Wars, like cut the chatter road too, and blah, blah, like stuff like that, and like having a overweight pilot named Porkins, really? So I'm not so sure about that, but I can see where you're coming from. Then again, the dialogue was just there for narrative's sake. I didn't really think it was meant to give us a lot of character development with those pilots or anything like that. But so, like, I don't know, maybe you're right. When I was watching the films, I never felt that, but I wasn't really paying attention to it. So maybe, Nicholas, what you're raising is a valid point. I'm going to go see it again, probably later tonight, and I'll watch for that. And maybe I'll feel differently about that after I see it again. Interesting point you're bringing up. All right, Angel Chang writes, I just don't see Kylo as a threat compared to Snoke. Well, compared to Snoke, Well, no, but Snoke is, he's the master of Kylo Ren. He's a much bigger threat than Kylo Ren. Clearly, Snoke is the more powerful of the two, just much like Rey is not a threat to Luke. Luke is far more powerful than Rey is. And by the way, there were some people tweeting me, Rey beat Luke in combat. No, she did not. Luke bested her like that. He wasn't even trying. When they got into their little melee combat thing, he wasn't even trying. He was just block, 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 disarm her. And then she took it one step further and grabbed a lightsaber while he's sitting there holding a metal stick. I mean, that's different. But Luke easily bested her in combat. Easily. Also, I was very happy. If you guys remember, I was saying I was going to be really mad if Finn was actually able to beat Phasma in a straight-up one-on-one fight, because that would make the novels useless, because the novels clearly establish she's the biggest badass in the galaxy as far as non-Force users go. And they found a good way to do it. She easily beat Finn again. She beats Finn, and she thinks he's dead because she knocked him off thing. Then she turns her attention to Rose and starts fighting Rose, and it ends with Finn sneaking up behind her going, hey, boom, when she thought he was dead. So they managed to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, that Finn and Rose get away, while at the same time maintaining the integrity of the novel that she would easily beat Finn in a straight-up fight. Because she did. She won the fight. She just didn't realize he wasn't dead, so she turned her attention to the next threat, started fighting Rose, and then she gets blindsided. So I like the way they handled that. I did. Let's see. Next one, Ben Rayner. Do you believe Kylo about Rey's parents? Oh, absolutely. Because remember, Kylo, I was having this debate with somebody online. He said, Kylo just lied to her. I said, no, he didn't, because she's the one who said it first. He's just like, you know who your parents are. You've known it all along. Say it. And she goes, and she just acknowledged it. She has known it all along. Her parents were nobody. She's known it all along. Deep down, she knew she was just flat up abandoned. There was that hope and that optimism that, no, my parents will come back for me someday. I don't know why they left me here, but it must have been for a good reason, because my parents would never abandon me. But she knew. She always knew. Her parents were nobody. And that's vital, and that's important. And I think that adds to the character. That becomes her own issue now that she's going to have to continue to face and overcome moving forward, that she was abandoned. That she was nobody outside of the Force. She was just a discarded kid in the backland wastes of Jakku, who the Force chose to be the rising light against the rising darkness of Kylo Ren. So yeah, I 100% believe that exchange. I've been saying it ever since The Force Awakens, that her parents were going to be nobody. 100% believe that exchange completely. Let's see. Siobhan Dixit writes, the Force is turning into a convenient plot device for the filmmakers to make characters do anything without any struggle or training. But it's consistent. First of all, let's always remember this. I was arguing this with The Force Awakens. People saying, how can she suddenly fight like that? It's not suddenly fighting like that. Rey, to survive, has been fighting in melee combat with that staff her whole life. She's going to be better than just about everybody else at that. And one of the things they show us when she's on the island with Luke and she doesn't realize Luke is there, she just has her staff and she's doing her training, reaffirming she knows combat with that staff, and she's been doing it her whole life. She's been having to survive and defend herself her whole life through physical combat. And I've been trying to tell people that after The Force Awakens, like, she's been fighting with that staff her whole life. Look what happened when Unkar Plutt's guys try to come and take her out. She, boom, takes them out just like that. Bang, bang, bang. You're done. So, I mean, it's not just a convenient thing. So put a lightsaber in her hand. It's not all that different. But again, Snoke kind of points out, look, darkness rises and the light to meet it. So the Force was working. And just because she didn't sit down and have ages of training and all that kind of stuff, the Force was moving through her because there has to be balance in the Force. So the Force was moving in her to empower her to the level of Kylo Ren. Because as the darkness rises, the light rises to meet it. That's the balance. And so I had no problem with that whatsoever. I had no problem with it when they were alluding to it in The Force Awakens. I have no problem with it now. If you have a problem with it, that's totally cool, because it's subjective. Whether it works for you or not is totally an individual thing. For me, it's completely consistent with everything they've talked about so far. Like, Luke all of a sudden, like, he had a couple of June lessons on the Millennium Falcon for 15 minutes, and all of a sudden, he can use the Force. I mean, so this is not inconsistent with what we've had in the Star Wars lore up to this point, from my point of view at any rate. Brody O'Connor writes, how will Rey get a lightsaber for 9? Build one or find Luke's green one? That's a good question. That's a good question. How will she get one? Because, obviously, maybe she'll repair it. Maybe we'll find out that over the past 30 years, it's something that Leia has looked into. Because remember that line Leia says to her at the end, saying, like, we have everything we need. She was speaking more metaphysically about having all the tools we need, sure, but I wonder if Leia won't be of help to her in that, because who knows about all the things she did look into and did maybe dabble in a little bit on her spare time. Maybe Luke at some point did help her build a lightsaber just in case she ever decided to fully embrace a Jedi path or something like that. There are a lot of different options here. I hadn't considered her finding Luke's green one. Maybe there's a problem with that. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's an interesting point of view, and it's a great question, by the way. Thanks a lot, Brody. Next one comes to us from Ben Rayner. Were you upset about how Snoke went out? No, loved it. Loved it. I thought it was great, and it made perfect sense. Because the way they were setting up Snoke and how powerful he was, there was no way Kylo and Rey were just going to be able to team up and fight him and beat him. Like, that would have been inconsistent with how strong they were making him out to be. So it would have had to have been something devious. Something a Sith would do. And the fact that Kylo pulled it off the way he pulled it off. And by the way, that's completely consistent with the whole Sith lore. 2, one master, one apprentice. One to have the power, one to crave it. And that's the way it played out. The apprentice ultimately kills the master. And he did it. And I liked the way he did it. It was sneaky, it was conniving, and it was believable. As opposed to just Kylo having enough of Snoke and going one-on-one with him. That just wouldn't have been consistent with the rest of the movie. So it worked for me. Didn't work for everybody, but it worked for me. A lot of things about there were a number of things that didn't work for me, which I've already talked about, but that happened to work for me. Let's see. Angel Chang writes, thoughts on Phasma's fight? Was a letdown for me. I was fine with Phasma's fight because she won the fight. What I am let down about is once again they underused her. Once again they underused her. She just shows up on my command and then boom. So look, the fight itself I was perfectly happy with. She beat Finn's ass. So that's all I really wanted. And then, then she got snuck up on. That can happen. It happened to Snoke, for heaven's sakes. So I was fine with that too, but I do feel, so while I was fine with the fight with Phasma, once again, a wasted character. A character that could have been really cool, much like Benicio del Toro's character, but once again falls short. And that's 2 movies in a row they did that with her. That was one of my big complaints about The Force Awakens as well, was an underutilized, underused Phasma. Especially if you're saying she's so high-ranking. Especially if you read the novel, she's very high-ranking in the First Order. So the fact that she just kind of pops up at the end made no sense to me. And it just to have her there just so she could have a quick fight with Finn, that almost feels as shoehorned in as the Maz Kanata. Not as shoehorned in as Maz Kanata, but it feels almost as bad to me. So the fight itself, I was fine with. But they underused the character. I mean, I think we can all agree with that. Whether you love the movie, hated the movie, I think we can all agree that Phasma was once again an underutilized character. That you show off as being so cool, and then you just completely underuse them. So that was unfortunate. David Jeffrey writes, does the Reylo theory still have merit after The Last Jedi? No, I don't think so. I mean, clearly, there was an emotional connection. But it was false. It was fake. Rey thought she saw Kylo's future and saw him turning to the light side, but that was all Snoke's manipulation. Because of that, she felt a connection. She felt she could go and save him. And I love the way they handled that, by the way. But I think they made it very, very clear in this movie. There is no redemption for Kylo Ren. There is no redemption for him. Luke knew it. And that's why he came and spoke to Leia first. I can't save him. And then Leia confirmed, I know, he's gone. My son is gone. And Rey realized it too. Like everybody across the board realized it. Kylo he's the villain now. He is the villain. There's no saving him. There's no redemption. He's too far gone. And that's that. This isn't like Luke with Vader saying, I feel the conflict. I know there's good in him. I know I can save him. They kind of toyed with that and then moved past it. There's no saving Kylo Ren. So going into episode 9, he's just the villain, and Rey is his counterpart in the Force, and it's going to come down to those two, and we're going to see how that all goes. All right. And I could be completely wrong. Who knows? Curtis Lopez writes, will Lucas appear as a Force ghost in episode 9? As we already covered that, I believe there's a very, very high chance. I would say as high as 95%. I believe he'll appear as a Force ghost and probably continue Rey's training as a Force ghost. Nicholas Glenn writes, so many people were disappointed with Luke in this movie. What do you think of all the backlash? Seems like the fan base is split on this. The fan base is not split. Split means 50-50. And the fan base is not split. The majority of people really embrace and like this movie. There's a bunch of people who, understandably so, because all film is subjective, do not. But again, there's 3 major audience rating metrics out there. 2 of them are pretty much useless. 1 of them is the most valid. But 2 out of the 3 of them are overwhelmingly positive. The IMDb audience rating for The Last Jedi is 81%. The cinema score, which is the only real one, because the cinema score is the only one that actually verifies that they are polling people who actually saw the movie and verify they only vote once. The cinema score was an A. The Rotten Tomatoes one was the one, which again is something that doesn't confirm that people saw the movie and they can vote multiple times and all that kind of stuff. Same as IMDb. So IMDb was high, but you got to throw it away. The Rotten Tomatoes one, I think you got to throw away too. But look, all you have to do is go into chat boards and forums and realize there are people who dislike the movie. And that's totally fair. There's nothing wrong with them not liking the movie. Every movie has people that don't like it. And it's totally fair, and we shouldn't ascribe excuses as to why they didn't like it. No movie's going to work for everybody. Hell, I don't like the original Blade Runner. Everybody loves the original Blade Runner. I don't. Because film is subjective. So there are people out there, very vocal people, who do not like the film. Nothing wrong with that. But to say that the audience is split, all the factual numbers say otherwise. 5 major metrics. Okay, I'll go over this again. We have Metacritic, we have the Rotten Tomatoes critic rating, we have the IMDb audience rating, we have Cinema Score, and we have the Rotten Tomatoes audience rating. 4 out of those 5 are overwhelmingly positive. The IMDb audience rating is 81%. The Cinema Score audience rating is an A. The Metacritic critic score is an 86. The Rotten Tomatoes critic score is a 93. And then the one, one of these things is not like the other thing, is the Rotten Tomatoes audience score, which once again, like IMDb, allows people who haven't, by the way, before the movie even had its first public screening, the Rotten Tomatoes audience rating had 23,000 votes. Before anybody had seen the movie. This was before the premiere. So anyway, but again, I do not think it's split. Every theater I've been in has been overwhelmingly positive, but there are people out there, and they're not a tiny number. It's not like it's a 90-10. It's probably more like a 70-30, I think. I think there's a good chunk, and 30 is a big number. I think there's a good chunk of people out there who just don't like the film. And there's nothing wrong with that. I do not think the numbers clearly show it's not 50-50, so it's not a split. But I think it could be upwards of 30%. I really do. Which is a significant number, again, because I think this movie took so many risks. Risks that worked for some people like me, risks that didn't work for other people. And again, there's nothing wrong with anybody not liking this film because they did. Hell, there are things about this film I don't like. So there you go. I mean, there you have it. Next one. Brody O'Connor writes, Holdo withholding plan from Poe. Your thoughts? Okay, so the Admiral withholding the plans from Poe, right? At first, that bothered me. Then I realized she doesn't know him from Adam. Why would she trust him with that information? As a matter of fact, she's never met him. She doesn't know him. And the one thing she does know about him was that he just made a major mistake that cost a lot of Resistance fighters their lives, and Leia just demoted him. Why would she share that plan with him? I think she just trusted that he wouldn't be a mutineer. But Poe, being an individual character, had a character flaw. He made a mistake, and it cost him, and it cost the Resistance as well. So at first, you're right, bro. That bothered me too. But then after I saw the movie the second time, and I realized, oh yeah, She doesn't know him from Adam. The main thing she knows about him was that he just cost a lot of resistance fighters their lives and lost them their entire bombing squadron. And on top of that, Leia just demoted him. Would you trust that guy? Probably not. So while I had a problem with it at first, now I don't have a problem. Now it makes sense. It's consistent now that I think about it. Siobhan Dixon writes, Rey is powerful for the sake of being powerful. She hadn't earned it. She exponentially gets stronger without any struggle. Is she a Mary Sue? No, she's not a Mary Sue at all. The fact of the matter is we see her struggle a lot. She makes mistakes. She has lapses in judgment. She was easily fooled and very naive by Snoke into believing like everything that Snoke was feeding her, all the lies that he was feeding her through the Force, and she bought into it, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. Nobody earns the Force. Right? No matter how hard Han decided to go to, if Han decided to go to a Jedi training academy and try to learn real hard to use the Force, he wasn't going to become a Jedi. The Force chooses its Jedi. The Force chooses who it indwells and who it can work through. The Force does it. And again, the way Snoke illustrates what it is about the whole thing, about the metaphor about the Force and balance that has run through the entire saga is completely made consistent by what they had with Rey and with Kylo. The darkness rises and the light to meet it. To me, it was completely consistent. Let's see. Danielle M. just put in a super chat. Thank you so much, Danielle. Andre Thompson writes, and sorry, I forgot to have these things up here on the screen. Andre Thompson writes, do you like the direction Rian Johnson goes in The Last Jedi, and do you want more risks taken going forward? Also, can you rank The Last Jedi? Is it too soon for you? Thanks. Well, to me, the way I rank the Star Wars movies is still the original trilogy. I said that coming out of the movie. The Last Jedi, I really like it, but it still doesn't touch the original trilogy for me. So to me, it's Return of the Jedi, Empire, New Hope. Then right now, I would put Star Wars The Last Jedi, then The Force Awakens, then Rogue One. Then we get into the bottom cellar dwellers, the prequels, Revenge of the Sith, Phantom Menace, and the very bottom of it would be Attack of the Clones. So I think even people who like the prequels would agree with that Attack of the Clones is probably the worst one. So that's where I would put it right now, for me, anyway. But the overall direction, I love it. I do. It'll be interesting to see which way JJ now goes, picking up the ball and taking it across the finish line. It'll be interesting to see how he does that. Brittany Bailey writes, do you think the Broom Kid will star in the new trilogy after Episode 9? That was the best twist in the movie, and I think it should lead somewhere. It's possible, but I doubt it. I think that scene at the end, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, the real point of that scene, I'm just going to reset this. The whole point of that scene was really just to show that the Force goes on, that the Force lives and the Force is still working, and it is doing what it has always done. And there is a new generation of kids who are going to be imbued with that gift. And I think that was the whole point, because Leia was giving that speech at the time. We have everything we need. And the whole theme of hope and everything was there. There is still hope in the galaxy. And Luke was right. It's not just about him. It's not about whatever. It's the Force still is at work. And I really like that. But I don't necessarily think we'll see that kid. Because honestly, that kid wasn't a very good child actor, to be honest with you. But I don't think we'll see that kid again. I think he was just there to make a point. And who knows, maybe Rey, by the end of 9, is going out to finding a bunch of these kids to start her own Jedi Academy. Because remember, at the end of the movie, we saw that those books did not burn in the tree. She had snuck the books out. Rey has all those Jedi texts. So maybe with the guidance of Luke, she'll become the instructor for a new generation of Jedi. Maybe. Or maybe not. Or maybe the kid isn't it. Who knows? All right, Jake writes, just dropping you a quick $5 to let you know I appreciate all you do. Been following you for years now. Sending love from Grimsby, Ontario. I used to go to Niagara College. That's where I studied law. Was at Niagara. And I used to have to drive through Grimsby every day to go to Niagara College. So thank you so much, Jake. I really appreciate that. I had some friends living in Grimsby, as a matter of fact. Pensive Ruin writes, Luke redeemed Vader, but has to kill Kylo? Yeah, because there was no redeeming Kylo. Like, Luke could only redeem Vader because that spark of Anakin Skywalker was always still in Vader. And the Emperor knew that. There was always that good part was in him that Vader was constantly his entire life fighting against. And when his own son came to him, it ignited it even more. So Luke, Vader had a very hard time now because that spark was there, having to turn on his own son. With Kylo, Rey knew, Luke knew, and Leia, his own mother, knew he was gone. There was no more light left in him. The light that Rey thought was in him was all a deception from Snoke. And all of them knew it's gone. He's gone. He is now completely over on the dark side. There was no redeeming him. I thought the movie made that pretty clear. So yes, there's a very good reason why Luke could turn Vader, but could not turn Kylo Ren. He couldn't turn to the good side with his own father there in front of him, and he stuck a lightsaber through him. So no, there was no redeeming him. Let's see. Nicholas Rosenblum writes, chances for Jedi resurgence in 9, not just Rey. I think a pretty good chance. I think one of the ending things we're going to see in episode 9, and again, I'm just speculating wildly here, I don't know anything, is that we will see in the third act, or even after Kylo Ren is defeated, whatever, that Rey, through the guidance of the Force Ghost of Luke and Yoda, and who knows, maybe even Obi-Wan shows up, don't know, but establishes a new Jedi Order and starts gathering up kids from across the galaxy. I think ultimately that's where it'll lead. Let's see. Sam Fisher writes, I didn't realize that Poe and Rey didn't meet in The Force Awakens. Hey, here's a big thing. Everybody, pay attention to this. This is important. It was funny because after this happened, me and Christian Harloff got together and we were talking about this. And one of the things he and I were actually texting about this too. Here's the thing. You know how they say that the novelizations of the movie are canon, right? That the novelizations of the movies are canon. Well, guess what? In the novelization of The Force Awakens, Rey and Poe meet. They met. And yet, here we are in episode 8, and they're meeting for the first time. So look, is it canon or is it not? And then you can say, well, it's canon as long as it doesn't conflict with the movies. Oh, but the movies are free to conflict them later on? If that's the case, then they were never canon in the first place. So that is a whole nother issue. That's a whole nother discussion for another time, because that has really been making me scratch my head. It's like, wait a minute, Pablo, you said if it's in the novelization, it's canon. But here we see something in a new movie after the novelization completely conflicting with what you say is canon, and now it's not canon. So they've got some answers. They owe us some answers on this. What is canon anymore? Just come out and say it. Look, just say the novelizations aren't canon. The movies are canon, the movies are canon. The novelizations of the movie are just extra decor, but they're not necessarily canon. Just say that and we're fine, and we'll move on. But that is something that's been driving me crazy ever since I saw the movie. The moment that happened, the first time I saw it, when they goes, hi, I'm Poe, hi, I'm Rey, I'm like, wait a minute. In the novelization of The Force Awakens, you guys met, and that's supposed to be canon, and it has driven me crazy ever since. But thanks for bringing that up, Sam. All right. Next one comes to us from Peter Fox, who writes, what's your thoughts on the jokes? None of them bothered me, but it did take me out of it once or twice, namely the Kylo shirtless thing. First of all, I thought the jokes with Maz Kanata did not work. I'm in the middle of a trade dispute with guns. It's like, oh, come on. I thought the jokes at the beginning of the film, because it was completely consistent with Poe Dameron from the first movie. Because remember Poe Dameron? Who talks first? You talk first or I talk first? I love that. And it's consistent when he messages General Hux. Hello, is General Hux there? I got a message from Leia. Am I on hold? Like, I thought it was great. I laughed a lot. I thought it was wonderful. Some of the other jokes, I'm not sure. Like, one of the things I loved right away, and every audience I've seen this movie with just lost their minds, when Rey hands Luke that lightsaber, and he does what nobody expected. Tosses it. And later you understand why he did that. It makes total sense why he did that later on. But at the moment you're like, what the hell? Like, nobody saw that coming. And I thought it was fun and funny. That one line when she says, I don't think those caretakers like me much. And Luke's like, I can't imagine why. I thought that was funny. So for the most part, I thought it worked. But like most movies, sometimes the humor didn't work and sometimes it pulls you out of it for a second. And I don't think that The Last Jedi was immune to that. I think there are a couple of moments that happened. The big ones to me was the Maz Kanata stuff, but maybe there were others for other people. Let's see. Sad7287 writes, Why did Luke have the blue lightsaber during the battle versus Kylo at the end? It had no history with Kylo, and he just saw it get destroyed. Why no green? Why did Luke have short hair? Luke projected himself to Kylo as Kylo would have remembered him. Because the last time Kylo saw Luke, look, remember, Luke was just projecting. He had the haircut. He could have any lightsaber he wanted to. Ultimately, it's kind of pointless and meaningless. It doesn't really matter whether he had the blue or had the green or had whatever. I think he just kind of projected himself. And maybe to sell the illusion, maybe, you know, Kylo would have thought, oh, Rey fixed it and gave it to him, and now he's walking out here to fight me. I mean, maybe that was to sell it. I don't know for sure, but I do know that considering the fact that Luke had shorter hair and had all these other differences, I don't think the color of the lightsaber is really all that significant or important. But, I mean, clearly it made you think, so if you've got a theory about that, I'd love to hear it. Drop into the comments section. Let me know what your theory about that is. Why did Luke in that projection fight have the blue saber instead of the green? Curious to know what you guys think. Scott Mick writes, I think Del Toro's character should have been Lando and rewrite that whole Canto Bight part. Also, why bring back Phasma just to kill her 30 seconds in? You know what, Scott? I can't disagree with anything you just said. Can't disagree with anything you just said. I think I'm on board with you and all that. I don't know that Lando could have played the role that DJ was supposed to be, but you would have had to come up with something else. Maybe she could have sent Finn and Rose to find Lando, because Lando, a long time ago, stole the master code break to all First Order stuff, because he's a thief and a scoundrel, much like Han, right? So maybe you could have come up with that. But I like what you're thinking. I'm going to say I 100% agree with you. I think that would have been better. I really do. All right. By the way, guys, if you have not sent in a message on Super Chat yet, please do not, moving forward, because I'm only about halfway through here. We got a whole much more to go. I'm going to keep going until I get through all of them, but please do not send in any more Super Chats. Thank you. Okay, let's go through these. Rude Shot just blankly sent in a Super Chat. Thank you so much, Rude Shot. That's really nice of you. Justin Walker writes, is it true what I heard that Daisy Ridley is leaving Star Wars franchise after this movie, Last Jedi? No, it is not true. She made a comment that was misinterpreted. She made a comment about, hey, I'm only signed up for the trilogy and blah, blah, blah. She never said, though, I'm done after 9. She later clarified those statements. She did an interview with Entertainment Tonight after that to clarify. She goes, I'm not saying I'm not coming back. Of course I'll come back if they want me back. All I was saying was that my contract, the way it is just for episodes 7, 8, and 9. I'm definitely coming back if they want me back. So she clarified that. It's just a bunch of us misinterpreted what she was saying. And to everybody else's defense, it did kind of sound like she was hinting that she may not come back. But what I tried to explain to people was, hey, look, guys, she never said I'm not coming back. And then a little bit later, she clarified her statement. So nope, nothing to worry about there. If they want Rey back, and clearly Kathleen Kennedy's already said they want to make new movies with Rey and Finn and Poe. So I think we are going to see her come back. All right, next one comes to us from Samantha Elliott, who writes, will Rey ever have a surname? Only if they ever discover who her parents really are. And I don't know that they ever will. Until then, Rey is just Rey. Maybe they'll give her a surname, but really at this point, what would be the point of her having a surname? I mean, we're 40 years in and Greedo still doesn't have a surname. So maybe they will, just for the sake of it. Maybe Leia goes, to give her peace of mind, Leia comes and says, I've been doing some research. Rey Obliquos Flin. And now she's Rey Obliquos Flin. And Rey feels better just knowing that she has a family lineage and she can proudly wear the name Obliquos Flin. I just made that name up, by the way. I have no idea. Thanks a lot for the question, Samantha. Next one comes to us from Carl Owachua 13, who writes, been watching since 2012. Thank you so much, Carl. Do you think J.J. Abrams will kill off Kylo or redeem him in 9? If he kills him off, there will be no more Skywalkers. Well, I mean, hey, maybe it will finally be Rey that kills off Kylo. But you know what? I have been saying this till I was blue in the face, and I've been saying it over and over and over again. Star Wars is not about the Skywalkers. It's not. The saga has been up until now. But if you want to follow the mythology all the way back to the Old Republic, no Skywalkers to be found. It's much like the analogy I always give is there was a period of time in the history of America when you could say that the story of America was the story of the Kennedy family. And there's a period of time that you could say that. But America and the full history of America is not just about the Kennedy family. It's about a whole lot more than that. And that's why, like when people say to me, Star Wars is about the Skywalkers, that's funny because I've read a lot of novels and I've played a lot of games that are canon, by the way, now, and there are a bunch of them that have no Skywalkers anywhere to be seen. Yes, episodes 1, 2, 3, well, not so much episode 1, but episodes 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, now 7 and 8, all have a Skywalker at the center of them so far, but Star Wars is bigger than just the Skywalkers. The Force is bigger than the Skywalkers. The history of this galaxy is far bigger than the Skywalkers. And I think one of the great ways to put an explanation point on that is to end the Skywalker line in episode 9 when Leia dies, if Leia dies in 9, and Kylo dies. And then that just puts an exclamation point on it, that Star Wars is bigger than just the Skywalker saga. Look, my favorite character of all time is Luke Skywalker. You all know this. But it's like Luke says, it's time for him to go. And the story of the galaxy will now move forward without them. And and you know what? I think that little scene at the end of the movie with the random little boy pulling over the broom using the Force, I think that is hinting to us that the story of the Force and of Star Wars and the galaxy as a whole is way bigger than one family line. Way bigger. And I think it's time to move on from the Skywalkers. I really do. As much as I love the Skywalker family, it's time to move on from the Skywalker family. Anyway, that's just my point of view. I'm sure a lot of you guys are screaming at me through your computer monitors right now that you completely disagree, which is totally fine. All right, let's move on here. Sharon Aurora writes, some people's complaints are the exact same points one can make about the original trilogy. Example, question Rey's ability to fight while Luke fought Vader in The Empire Strikes Back. And yeah, actually put up a fight. Remember, he got in a shot on Vader on The Empire Strikes Back too. Remember, he got him on the arm and Vader's, ah! Like, remember that? Luke gets in a shot. He's never had a lightsaber fight in his life. And here he is fighting against the Lord of the Sith because the darkness rises, the light to meet it. The Force was moving into Luke and moving through Luke to bring balance. So I think you're completely right about that. That's a very good point, and I agree with you on that. All right. Bill Dozermerk writes, what are your thoughts now on the Knights of Ren scene from The Force Awakens? Obviously, not the same night Ben burned the temple. So what was that a vision of? Good question. Me and my friend were having a discussion about this the other day. I believe we have not seen the end of the Knights of Ren. I believe the Knights of Ren will come into play in episode 9. Because Snoke is gone, Snoke's Red Guard is gone. We know from The Force Awakens, Snoke refers to Ren as Master of the Knights of Ren. So I believe we are going to see the Knights of Ren in episode 9. They become his backup. They become his support. And I believe we're going to see them. And I think we're going to see Rey cut through a couple of them before ultimately getting to Kylo a little bit later on. It's going to be like a video game, getting through certain levels of bosses, and then she'll get back to Kylo. And I think the Knights of Ren will be a part of that. So, great question. A lot of people haven't been thinking, a lot of people have not brought up, hey, where were the Knights of Ren? I think they're the ace in the hole. I think we are definitely getting them in 9, especially since J.J. Abrams is directing 9. We're definitely going to see those Knights of Ren. Let's see. Thurby writes, how will JJ respond in episode 9 to Rian Johnson throwing out most of the elements / characters JJ introed in The Force Awakens? I hate that we didn't get satisfactory answers in The Last Jedi. Well, that's your point of view. Remember, JJ worked with setting up the basic story for episode 8. JJ was a part of that. He's a producer on that film. Him and Rian Johnson sat down and they figured out what the main points are going to be. It's not like, JJ had nothing to do with the episode. It's like, oh my goodness, Rian Johnson just took everything and went in a totally different direction than I want. That didn't happen. And by the way, things you're saying you didn't get a satisfactory answers in, I think we got very satisfactory answers in. I've been predicting and calling the answer to Rey's parentage the whole time, and I'm totally satisfied. I believe that's the only way you could have answered that, was that her parents are nobody. I love the fact, I hear some people complaining, we got no development with Snoke. You know what? We got just as much, if not more development of Snoke than we ever got in The Emperor in the original trilogy. And everybody loves the Emperor in the original trilogy. Now, granted, in later movies, they gave him even more background with the prequels. But in the original trilogy, we knew nothing about the Emperor. Except that he was evil, he was the Emperor, and he was powerful. That's all we knew about the Emperor. That's all. We didn't have to know much more about Snoke. And I've been making that argument for a few months. Guys, we don't need to know anything more about Snoke. Well, we need to find out what the origin of Snoke is. No, we don't. We never knew what the origin of the Emperor was. Even after the prequels, we don't really know the origin, unless you want to go into the novels that aren't canon anymore. But I found the answers given were very satisfactory to me. Now, again, all film is subjective. Maybe they weren't satisfactory to you, and I'm sure they weren't satisfactory to a bunch of people. I can understand why too. If you were looking for certain things to happen, I can see why you would feel like you weren't satisfied. I know for me, a couple things happened that I never thought would happen, and they did, and I loved them. And some of the things that I just thought were just logical that they had to happen that way did, and I also feel very satisfied with those. But that's just my point of view on that. But I think JJ is going to follow through, because I believe Episode 8 was also part of his plan too. So let's not pretend like they were just two totally different minds, not interacting or conferring or whatever whatsoever. Remember, JJ is one of the guys who hired. Like, remember, Kathleen Kennedy told a story about her and JJ sat down trying to figure out who they're going to get to direct, and they talked to people, and JJ was part of that process. So it's not like JJ went and saw Episode 8 and went, "What did Rian Johnson do?" No, he knew everything that was going to happen in the movie, and now he'll pick up the ball for Episode 9 and carry it the rest of the way. Bex EXP writes, "May the Force be with you always." Thank you so much for the well wish, Bex. I really appreciate that, and may the Force be with you. Sad7287 writes, "We never get any real origins of the First Order, Resistance or their rise, or what's going on across the galaxy. The Last Jedi made the galaxy seem even smaller." I disagree with you completely. The original trilogy never gave us any of the origins of the rebellion. We didn't need it. And if you really want to go into it, the Star Wars canon did give us what we need. Like, we didn't need to know anything else. But if you read the novelization of Bloodline, then it really does go into how the First Order gets kind of going and gets moving, how the Resistance gets formed. The end of the novel Bloodline is Leia establishing the Resistance. So that's in novels, but they just realized we didn't need that in the movies. We don't. Would they have been interesting to know? Sure, but from a narrative point of view, we didn't need that information. And if you really want that information, it's available in other canon material, but it wasn't necessary to the storyline. And maybe you feel differently, and that's totally cool if you do. From my point of view, I've been saying all along, we don't need to know who Snoke is or where he comes from. We don't need to know this, and we don't need to know that. And if you really do want to know that other stuff, it exists in some other canon material that you can go and get if you want, but it doesn't add anything. At least not from my point of view, it doesn't. Anthony Zarazua writes, "Glad Trevorrow is not directing Episode 9. Let's put it this way. I understand why he's not. Lucasfilm has done a bad job of properly vetting and hiring new directors without being 100% sure they were on the same page with these new directors. That has been a common flaw, and I believe the buck stops with Kathleen Kennedy. I love Kathleen Kennedy. I think she's great, but that has been her biggest weakness so far running Lucasfilm, is bringing on new directors that she wasn't 100% sure that she was 100% on the same page with, and ultimately that's led to a lot of drama. So them going with JJ made perfect sense. I thought them going with JJ, Steven Spielberg, obviously Ron Howard, who's a director they know very well and she has worked with over the years. That made sense to me. And going back to JJ makes sense. Let's put it this way. I was very interested in seeing what Trevorrow was going to do. But if you had asked me, would I rather have Trevorrow directing it or would I rather have JJ directing it? I probably would have said I would rather have JJ directing it. Just my point of view, at any rate. Okay, let's move on here. Duan Gracias de Oliveira writes, "Could Snoke still come back? To cheat death as a power only a few have achieved. Was Kylo lying about Rey's parentage? May the Force be with you." Well, we've already addressed the Rey was not lying, or Kylo was not lying, because Rey knew the answer first. Remember, the first person to say that Rey's parents were nobody was Rey. And she's always known. She has always known that her parents were nobody. And Kylo just affirmed that to her. So that's all it was. So there's nothing to that. Can he come back, cheat death? I don't think so. I think they're going to move into episode 9 with Kylo being the definitive bad guy. I think that was always the plan. That in episode 9, Kylo was the big bad guy and ultimately the one they'd have to take down. So that's the way I think they're going. I could be wrong about that completely, but that's the way I think they're going. All right. Sam Fisher writes, is it just me or did this feel like the end of the trilogy? They still left things open. It just felt more like any ending than I would have thought. Well, if anything, to me, it feels a lot like the ending of Empire Strikes Back. It was very much a defeat. Like, if you're taking a scorecard, who won episode 1 of this trilogy? Okay, so who won The Force Awakens? The First Order won. Because, yeah, they took out Starkiller Base, but not until the First Order decimated the Republic and took out their core world, took out all the leadership, and left the Republic in shambles. So clearly, that win goes to the First Order. Who won the second episode? Who won The Last Jedi? First Order did. They win. They found the Resistance base. They've decimated like 90% of the Resistance they've decimated. They destroyed their home base. They destroyed their second home base. And now at the end of this movie, they're like 40 or 50 people scraggling away in the Millennium Falcon. The win clearly goes to the First Order. So in that regard, it does feel a little bit like the Empire Strikes Back ending to me, because obviously the Empire Strikes Back ends with the Empire getting the win and just the rebels escaping. That's what we've got here, so we'll see how it gets set up. So to me, it didn't feel like the end of the trilogy. It felt like the setup for the finale. To me, The Last Jedi feels like the setup for the finale. Thanks a lot for the question, man. All right, Anthony R. writes, JJ has to explain the Knights of Ren and Snoke while being original. Didn't hate The Last Jedi, but Ryan made JJ's job harder. Also, I think Snoke is still alive. You know what, Anthony, you're not the only one to think Snoke is still alive. I think there are a bunch of people out there who still feel Snoke is alive, that he will come back. I don't think so. I really do think that they're going to go the way of Kylo now being the big bad guy. And I'm just going to take off my jacket here because it's starting to get, with all the lights, it's starting to get warm in here. I think they're going to go the way of Kylo being the villain. He's the bad guy in the film. That's the way they're going to do it. So I kind of think that's the way they're going to handle it. As far as what you're saying about Snoke, they have to come up with the Knights of Ren being original, whatever. Remember, I think JJ is one of the guys who helped come up with the story. He didn't write it, but I think he laid the blueprint, and he laid that out with Kathleen Kennedy and with Rian Johnson. So he knew where they were going with it. I mean, he's the one who came up with the first story. He knew where they were going with it. And I think they'll be just fine moving forward. I really do. All right, what's next here? This next one comes from Tracy E., who writes, I loved this movie. What do you think about what Luke said to Kylo about not being the Last Jedi? Was he talking about Rey? Oh, yes. Yes. But I think he was talking about more than just Rey. Like, and when I'm gone, I'm not the Last Jedi. There was Rey, but then we see that last scene again with the kid. I think Luke reached out through the Force, knew that the seeds were being planted by the light side of the Force throughout the entire galaxy. That there are new Force users being born and rising up who will bring balance and hope back to the galaxy. So I kind of think he was thinking about it in that term. And I agree with you, Tracy. I love it. I have my issues with it. I do. I have some problems with this film, but overall, I really loved it. Let's see. P. Cheek writes, I like P. Cheek, that's neat. Do you think Luke's instinct to pull his lightsaber on Ben was out of character? Sure, he immediately regretted it, but it still seems odd to me. I don't think it felt out of character at all. Remember, we're talking about a character now who is like, 15 years, 20 years after the events of the Return of the Jedi? Only Luke knows the depths of the darkness he saw in Kylo. Did he see the next Vader rising? Did he see the next guy who's going to kill billions of people across the galaxy? Would Luke have killed a young Adolf Hitler if he knew he could have killed Adolf Hitler when he was a kid and stopped genocide? That's the question. So was it out of character? No, and I love the fact that Luke is not a perfect character. I love the fact that he struggled with that decision. He saw the darkness in Kylo. He knew what was coming. He knew the atrocities that Kylo Ren would commit as a master, powerful dark side user. He knew all of that, and he struggled with what to do. So he struggled with it and then chose not to. I love that they did that. that they showed that Luke is flesh and blood human. He struggled with choices. He's faced with an impossible thing. This guy in front of me, my own nephew, is becoming the embodiment of all-powerful evil. What do I do about it? And there was the temptation to strike him down. And then he decided against it. I thought it was beautiful. I really do. I thought it was beautiful the way I don't wish they had handled that any different, to be honest with you. That's just my opinion, but that is how I feel about it. Thanks a lot for the comment, P-Cheek. Next one comes to us from Dave Perez, who writes, I was hoping for a Luke scene that rivaled Vader at the end of Rogue One. Are you disappointed that we didn't see Luke mess some fools up with a lightsaber? Well, like, as you guys know, that's what I was looking for going into this movie. I wanted to see Luke screwing up some fools. I want to see him messing some fools up with his lightsaber. I didn't get it, and yet I left fully satisfied. Would I still have preferred a little scene of Luke showing up and then cutting down some people? Sure, but then that doesn't go along with the fact that he was doing his all-powerful Jedi Force projection thing. That would be contrary to that, so that wouldn't work. Would I have preferred it maybe if one scout ship of First Order troopers showed up on the island to take out Luke and Luke just decimated them? Yep, I would have liked to have seen that. I'm still completely emotionally satisfied with what they did and how they did it. But yeah, of course I'm a little bit disappointed. I would have loved to have seen Luke do that, but that doesn't take anything away from how much I loved what they eventually ended up doing with him at the same time. Thanks a lot for the question, Dave. All right, next one comes to us from Ethan Freirix, who writes, John, what do you think about Kylo Ren abandoning the Sith's rule of two and making the Knights of Ren the new Sith for episode 9? I don't think that's inconsistent, because remember, Kylo, his whole philosophy here seems to be, let the past die. Let it die. Whatever those old traditions were, whatever anything like that was, let it go. Forget it. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And that really does seem like the character of Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren is forget everything else, forget anything responsible for whatever. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. He is a being that is completely governed by his own whims and passions. And that is ultimately the manifestation of what the dark side is, right? Giving in to your own whims and passions. And Yoda warned against that. So that's truly what he is. And since that's what he is, I totally dig it. I think that's exactly what we're dealing with here. Thanks for bringing that up, man. Daniel Briggs writes, wasn't a big fan of Leia floating like a witch or Snoke, I think you meant, being taken out so easily. But the biggest shock was that the Porgs work. The Porgs did work, right? I mean, I adore them. The Leia floating through space thing, first of all, I was shocked. Like everybody else, when she died, the whole theater gasped. Like, and then when her fingers move again in space, the whole theater went crazy and erupted. Remember, her floating through that's not a stretch. That for even the most basic Force user. And remember, in space, there's no resistance. So it's just, you just float. So for her to, like, through the Force, grab onto something and pull herself towards it, that's the most basic of any Force skill. So for that, the bigger skill, of course, was the Force entombing her and keeping her alive in the vacuum of space. That's the bigger thing. But this whole thing about, oh, what, Leia can fly now? She's floating in space. The slightest nudge will send her sailing down to the ship. I mean, because there's no air resistance in space. The slightest nudge and she goes sailing into the ship. For her to use the most modicum of Force ability to tug on something to cause inertia for her to float down, that's nothing. The thing we should be asking is, okay, what kind of Force power is that can, like, keep her preserved while floating in this vacuum of space? That's the bigger question. The floating through space, to me, that's a non-issue to me. Anyway, and you're right. I was shocked that the Porgs work. I thought the Porgs would have been ridiculous and silly, but they did work for me. Okay, let's move on now. Alan Jensen writes, 9 out of 10. Second favorite Star Wars movie behind the Empire. I loved it. I could have cried when I saw Yoda in all of his puppet glory. I mean, so many people were so thrilled. Again, me, I don't rank it that high. To me, it doesn't come into the same league as the original trilogy. Totally respect that they do for you. That's great. They don't quite get there for me. But yeah, that moment when Yoda showed up, man, the theater just went crazy when that happened, and was really a nice, pleasant surprise that it was a puppet Yoda, because there was no need. He wasn't doing enough that you needed him to be CGI. I would have been totally fine with them using a CGI Yoda, had he needed to be in an action sequence or something. But considering he was just basically standing there, just a few movements with his hands and a little like that, I thought it was a great decision for him to just be a puppet Yoda. And I agree with you. That was wonderful to see. Thanks a lot for sending that in, Alan. Next one comes to us from Call Me Riddick, who says, thoughts on the kid grabbing his broom with the Force at the end? P.S. Luke was a boss in this. Damn right Luke was a boss. Luke didn't do anything that I thought I wanted him to do. And he ended up being a bigger boss than I ever imagined he would. The amount of power that they said Luke has in this film, clearly the most powerful Force user ever, was amazing to me. And I loved it. I ate it up. The kid we already talked about. Again, that's to me, the Force. It's the movie showing us that Star Wars goes on. The Force is still at work in the universe. The light side is still rising to meet the dark and planting seeds within even kids throughout the galaxy. So to me, that worked great and worked on every level. Sam Fisher wrote, I knew Luke was a Force projection versus Kylo Ren because he had different haircut. There were two big things that were giveaways about him being a Force projection. One was the haircut. That's definitely one. The second was this, and Anne is the one who pointed this out to me. She's the one who pointed this out in the second one, was that as he and Kylo are standing there, when Kylo would step on the ground, the red of the salt came up from underneath. When Luke was walking, there were no footprints, and I didn't even notice that the first time I saw the movie. So the two big key giveaways, as long as I'm not remembering this wrong, one is Luke's haircut. Number two was the fact that Luke was not leaving any footprints as he was walking on that thing where Kylo Ren was. So those are the two big little hints that they dropped that we probably didn't notice until after the fight started. All right, good observation, Sam. The next one comes to us from Carlo Wachua 13, who writes, it was great to meet you at Comic-Con this year. Oh, thank you. I love it when I'm at Comic-Con or a Star Wars Celebration or just out and about in Burbank when you guys recognize me and you come up and say hi. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Obviously I can't remember exactly who you were. I met a lot of people at Comic-Con, but I'm honored that you took a time out to walk over to me and say hello. That meant a lot to me. Thank you so much. All right. Jack Hudson writes, how did Leia survive in space? That scene is weird. Again, clearly it's the Force. The Force did it. To me, that, though, is the bigger question, other than how did she fly? Well, flying is nothing because it's a vacuum of space, the slightest nudge of the Force, and she can go sailing. That's fine. The bigger question is, what kind of Force power is that the Force seemed to entomb her and keep her alive in space? That's the bigger question. I kind of hope they address that in Episode 9, to be honest with you. I really do hope they address that. Carlo Wachua 13 writes again, it was great to meet you at Comic-Con. Oh, didn't you just send that in? You sent it in twice. Well, there you go. Well, thank you again anyway, a second time. Andrew B writes, why doesn't Ben Solo recognize it wasn't Luke as Luke while holding the blue lightsaber he just broke? Plot hole? No, not a plot hole at all. Yeah, it just broke, but it's Luke Skywalker. He could have made another blue lightsaber. He could have made 15. He could have made 1,000 lightsabers in all the time he's been alone on that island. I mean, that is really not a plot hole whatsoever. And besides that, he just witnessed Luke Skywalker survive a barrage of laser fire from a bunch of walkers. You think the biggest thing on his mind is the color of Luke's lightsaber? I don't think so. So, no, I didn't see that as a plot hole whatsoever. Not in the least. Reggie Phoenix writes, since we didn't see the Knights of Ren in 8, do you see Kylo Ren joining them in hunting Rey's New Order? Also, do you think she will go double saber? I think she'll turn that down. I've said it from the beginning. I don't think that staff of hers is just going to end up being a metal staff. Maybe she turns that thing into a double-bladed lightsaber. Who knows? But as I already mentioned in an earlier question, yeah, I totally believe the Knights of Ren are going to play a significant part in Episode 9. I think they're going to show up in force, and they are going to be Rey's or Kylo's main henchmen. And we're going to see Rey have to go through a few of them before ultimately ending up confronting Kylo again. So I do believe they're setting that up, absolutely. Let's see. Brimmick70 writes, what novels come out of this now? Hoping for Snoke and Ben Solo backstories. Also, Maul pretty much confirmed to be more powerful than Snoke. I don't, after seeing everything Snoke does in this movie, you think Maul was more powerful than Snoke? I don't see it. I don't see it at all. I think Snoke would have smoked Maul, to be honest with you, probably pretty easily. But as far as, I think I agree with you, though, when you're talking about which direction do novels go, I do not doubt for a second that sometime in 2018 we'll at least get the announcement of a Snoke novel. I think we will get a Snoke novel. So for those people who are interested, even though it's not important, those people who are interested in knowing more about the backstory of Snoke, I believe they'll provide it with that. It seems like good material to do a novel on. And then maybe, it could even be two separate novels. A Snoke novel about his origin, then a novel about Snoke first recognizing the power in Ben Solo and starting the seduction of Ben Solo. That could definitely be a novel. I completely agree with you there. All right, Shivam Dixit writes, Leia in space was cringeworthy. I could hear audible laughs in the audience. It's just plain stupid and out of nowhere. I mean, that's cool that was your audience. The audience I was in, actually all the audiences I was in, I'm just telling you the experience I had. When her hand moves in space and it goes back to her and her eyes open, the theater I was in went nuts. Went completely nuts. And remember, we're talking about a story about magic space wizards. So the idea that one could survive in space for a short amount of time, with everything else we've seen the Force do in the Star Wars saga, it's not that big of a stretch. I mean, the original trilogy, we literally saw guys shoot lightning out of his fingers. So is it that big of a stretch that the Force could keep her alive for a few seconds in space before she could be pulled back into the ship? I don't know that it's that big of a stretch, to be honest with you. And maybe your theater did cringe at it. Maybe there are a lot of theaters that cringe at it. All I can tell you is that the limited experience I had, the theaters I was in watching the movie every time I saw it, the theater went nuts when her eyes opened. They went crazy positive. And then again, I mean, every theater will be different and unique. Adam A. writes, big fan and Patreon supporter from Vienna, Austria. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. You make my page possible. Thank you. Do you think the kid at the end of the movie may have to do with the RJ trilogy? No, I don't think so. I think Rian Johnson's trilogy is not going to be a direct sequel. Rian Johnson's trilogy is not going to be episodes 10, 11, and 12. It's going to be something different in a different time period. We don't know when that is. All we know is it's not Old Republic, but there's still thousands of years of history they can do. Now, by the way, guys, I'm noticing that some of you are still dropping in super chats. While I appreciate it, please do not add in any more super chats because I am running out of time here and I want to get through all the questions that have come in. So, no, I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think it would have been cool if it was, but what we've heard from Rian Johnson and from Lucasfilm seems to suggest that it's not the direction they're going to go in. So who knows? Maybe we'll come back to that kid. Maybe we won't. Kern Dog 1 writes, hey, I love Star Wars 7 and enjoyed 8, but the fan reaction, both good and bad, has kind of turned me off to the franchise. Any advice to change this? Well, I think hearing ridiculous overpraise of a film and ridiculous overcriticism of a film can certainly affect our outlook of a film. It absolutely can. Severe hyperbole never helps anybody, whether it's severe hyperbole positive or severe hyperbole negative. And I think we're seeing some of that with the Last Jedi on both sides. Like, I mean, I read some critics coming out, and it's fine. If it's what they really feel, then that's totally fine. But, you know, some of the critics who were at one of the screenings I was at coming out and saying, this is the best Star Wars movie ever. I'm like, no. And then reading some things online. This movie made no sense. It was completely stupid. No, you weren't paying attention then. But, you know, extreme hyperbole either way doesn't help anybody and can turn us off. The best advice I can give is probably what everybody else online would say. Just watch the movie and create your own experience. And then maybe seal out what everybody else is saying, both with the extreme hyperbole positive and the extreme hyperbole negative. Find balance. Find your balance and find the movie for you. And if the movie works for you, then just focus on that. And if it doesn't work for you, then just focus on that too. Whatever your experience is, let that govern your thoughts of the films. That's the best advice I can give. Let's see. Kern Dog 1. Oh, so that was Kern Dog 1. Sad7287 writes, doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end. They end in the same state as they started, without a few characters, no consequences. Do you think it holds up as its own film? What the hell are you talking about? No beginning, middle, and end. The same state they were in where they started? Okay, just to clarify here, Sad 7287, like if you don't like the movie, that's cool. That is totally fine. But it's, to quote Luke Skywalker, it's amazing. Everything you just said is factually wrong. They're in the same state they were at the beginning. Let's see. At the beginning, they were a full military force with a military base, squadrons of bombers, tons of fighters, a coordinated, organized military movement with a living Luke Skywalker and all this kind of stuff. Don't tell me that the movie ends with them being in the same state. The state they're in at the end of this movie now is that they are pretty much wiped out. They're on their last legs now. Luke Skywalker is gone. Rey has discovered what she is in the Force. The Supreme Leader Snoke is dead, and now we've got Kylo Ren leading the First Order. The movie ends with the same state everything's in at the beginning? Look, again, I'm not going to poo-poo on you at all if you didn't like the film, because all film is subjective. I celebrate if you liked it. I celebrate if you didn't like it. That's cool, as long as you had your own experience with the movie. But what you are saying is factually wrong. It's completely incorrect. So yes, absolutely. This movie stands up as its own film, but it's important to understand it's not just its own film. It is the middle chapter of an overall saga. Much like Two Towers was for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and much like Empire Strikes Back was in the middle of the original trilogy. This one definitely has a beginning, it definitely has a middle, and it definitely has conclusion to several of the story arcs that were running throughout this film. So it's cool if you didn't like the movie, that's cool. But to say this movie didn't have a beginning, middle, and end, and to say their scenario that they start of, they're just in the same place that they were in the middle when the movie ends, and that there are no consequences? There's no consequences. Okay, let's follow. A whole, almost like 9/10 of the resistance are now dead. Their bombing squadron is gone. Almost all their pilots are dead. Luke Skywalker is dead. Let's keep talking about how there's no consequences? Are you kidding me? Come on, you're smarter than this. It's fine if you didn't like what they did. That's cool. There's nothing wrong with you criticizing how they did it and that it didn't work for you, and all that's cool. But my brother, my fellow fan of movies, let me tell you, heart to heart, to say that there was no consequences in this movie is just factually ridiculous. To say that everything ends in the same state that it started is just factually ridiculous. Yeah, so whether you like them or dislike them, totally up to you. There's nothing wrong with that. But come on, those statements are just factually untrue. Just factually untrue. Okay, but thank you for sending in your thought on that. I do appreciate that. And again, we have a different point of view, and yet we're film fans together, and we can still be buddies. All right, Juna Tumoi Joa writes, I'm so bad at names. Do you think it was a mistake to kill Snoke? Nope, I thought it was ballsy. I really do. Because the theaters I was in, nobody saw it coming. Nobody. Everybody assumed. You know, here's the funny thing. I've been saying for a long time that I knew the mother of all spoilers for this movie. And out of the thousands of tweets, Facebook comments, YouTube comments, emails that I've gotten from people taking guesses at what the big spoiler was, nobody guessed the death of Snoke. Nobody guessed it. They caught everybody completely off guard with that, which I think is great because it sets it up now that it's truly, the finale of this story is truly Kylo and Rey. That's the way it needed to be. And so I don't think it was a mistake. Now, if you asked me before I saw the movie, hey, do you think if they killed Snoke in this movie it'd be a mistake? Maybe I would have said yes. But seeing how the story is unfolding and what it's really been building up to, then I don't think it's a mistake. I think it was the right move, honestly. The Batfleck writes, are you mad that there wasn't an actual lightsaber duel between Luke and Kylo, or a scene where Luke wrecked up shop with a squadron of stormtroopers? Well, somebody actually asked that a little bit earlier. Am I disappointed in that? Yes. But at the same time, it's not mutually exclusive. I am completely satisfied with what they did. You know, if you had told me going into this movie, hey, Luke's not going to have a legit lightsaber fight, he's not going to wreck up a bunch of stormtrooper fools and all that kind of stuff, I would have been very disappointed. Like, really crushed. But that's why you shouldn't carry those expectations into a movie. Because I left my expectations at the door, I went in, I watched the movie, and then boom, they gave us the movie they had in mind, and it totally emotionally satisfied me. Yes, I'm disappointed we didn't get to see all those things I've been fantasizing about seeing Luke Skywalker do, but it worked, and it worked for me. So on that level, I am both a little bit disappointed, but at the same time completely emotionally satisfied from the narrative as an audience member. So anyway, there's that. Next question. Benjamin Bertrand writes, the rule of two is a traditional part of Sith lore. By killing Snoke, does this, unbeknownst to himself, put Ben Solo on the path to becoming a Sith? I think it's an interesting question, because one of the things they do not answer directly, at any rate, is the Sith question. They allude to it. I mean, look, Snoke is looking for the next Vader. That implies that he is Sith, right? The very fact that if he was just outside Sith, he wouldn't be looking for the next Darth Vader to be the next Vader to his Emperor Palpatine, right? So he wouldn't be he was looking for his second. So while they never directly say, I am Snoke, Dark Lord of the Sith, he never says that in the movie, but it is implied. But they also imply, and I mentioned this earlier, Kylo Ren saying, let all things die. Get rid of all the old traditions. Screw everything else. I'm going to do my own thing. So I think he probably sees himself as Sith, or he might see himself as being beyond the Sith. It'll be interesting to see if they address this going into episode 9, because you're right, that is a question that looms in the air a little bit. Thanks for bringing that up. I really appreciate that. Okay, the next one comes to us from Amin Mashiakia, who writes, do you still like Canto Bight as a planet? Nope. I never liked it as a planet. I still don't like it as a planet. To me, it was one of the big things that I had a problem with this movie, that entire story. I've mentioned this earlier, so I'm not going to go into it too much. I did not like that part of the movie. I did not like that storyline at all. I didn't like the direction they went with that. I did not enjoy it. Let's see, next one. Koa1708 writes, the current Star Wars storylines ends with episode 9 or 3 more movies? Oh, well, look, the storyline will continue. Kathleen Kennedy has already confirmed in an interview when she said, we're already planning new movies. We've got 10 more movies planned, and we're going to keep going with the stories of Rey, Poe, and Finn. So they've already got this story continuing. Probably a different story, but their story, these character stories, are going to go on. So they're going to move forward with that. But I don't know if there's going to be episode 10, 11, and 12, but we are going to get more movies with these characters, absolutely. That much we know for certain. All right, Reggie Phoenix writes, did you think Phasma and Snoke were underused? Snoke, no. Snoke was used even more than the Emperor was in the original trilogy. I was perfectly happy with the amount that they used Snoke. I'm glad they kept more of the attention on Kylo and Rey, because not only they're more interesting, but they're going to be the big, yin versus yang in episode 9. So I'm glad they set that up more. But as I mentioned earlier, yep, I feel like they underused Phasma. That was one of the mistakes of this movie. They underused Phasma. Totally. So I wish they had done more with her. Now they've underused her 2 films in a row, and that is really unfortunate. That is one of the bad things about this film. Sad7287 writes, Yoda didn't give advice to Luke over the years? Hard to say. Maybe he did at some point. Maybe he didn't. We don't know that yet. They certainly leave the door open. I mean, Luke doesn't seem shocked. When Yoda shows up there at the end, Luke doesn't seem shocked to see him. He's just Master Yoda. It sounds more like hey, I haven't seen you in a year, or I haven't seen you in 2 years. And it's not like Yoda said, I have been watching you, Luke, for these last 30 years. My Yoda impersonation is terrible. But it's not like Yoda says, oh, it's been forever since we've talked, Luke. No, they could say that Yoda has visited him a number of times through the years. It's possible. There was nothing definitive in that conversation that says this was the first time Luke saw Yoda in a long time. So who knows? We'll have to see where they go with that. Jesse Martin writes, why kill Snoke? I'm a lore fiend. Ended it so quickly. Not sure. Clearly there's a spell check error in there. Why kill Snoke? I think we've explained why they kill Snoke. Number one, because it caught everybody surprised. Nobody saw it coming. And also it sets up what the true finale of this series should be, which is Rey versus Kylo. That's what they've been setting up. This whole franchise so far is setting up Rey versus Kylo. Snoke had to go. And I love the way they did it. As I explained earlier why I love the way they did it. But I love the way they did it. Let's see here. Green Monarchy writes, well, no choice now, have to recast Leia. No, they do have a choice. They could just say the opening crawl, Leia's in the outer sectors of the galaxy trying to recruit new members of the Resistance. That's all they have to do. That explains why, if you want to do episode 9 without recasting Leia and not have Leia in the story, just say Leia is out in the outermost reaches of the Outer Rim trying to recruit new support for the Resistance. There you go. I hope they recast Leia. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that, but they could easily explain just in the opening crawl why she's not there. One of the things I hope they do not do is just go, General Leia tragically died in a transport accident 5 minutes after the end of episode 8. Like, I hope they don't do that. But either say she's off somewhere on a recruiting mission or recast. I vote recast. Dave Perez writes, thoughts on Captain Phasma? Finn beat her quickly. First of all, as I mentioned before, Dave, that's the thing. Finn didn't beat Phasma. Phasma beat his ass and beat him easily. It's just that she knocked him off that edge and she thought the fight was done. She thought he was dead. So then now it was no longer a fight between him and her. She then turned her attention to Rose. And that's where her attention was after defeating Finn, except Finn wasn't dead. Then Finn comes up behind her and cheap shots her. That's fine. So that, to me, made it accomplish Finn and Rose getting off the ship while still being consistent that Phasma is clearly the better warrior. And watch the fight again. Phasma beats his ass. And then thought she finished him off and then turned her attention to a new threat. Then, Finn comes up from behind her. Hey, boom, and gives her a cheap shot. So that's how it ended, and I was perfectly fine with that. Because I was going to be very upset if they had Finn straight up beat Phasma in a fight. Because that would have been completely inconsistent with everything else that they've showed us so far. Jonathan Blaza writes, we're looking forward to Porgs, but found them annoying, obviously for toy money. How much money can studios make from toys alone? How important is that really? Well, I mean, look, Jonathan, I was opposite from you in every way. You were looking forward to them. I was dreading them. You found them annoying. I ended up loving them. I thought they were great. I thought they were a nice little extra ingredient to the film. Something that was just cute and adorable and lovable. There's none of that in the rest of the film. So having 4 or 5 shots of them just pop up to do something for a half second, I thought it added another layer to the film. It added a new dimension to the film, gave it another ingredient that I felt worked for me. But hey, look, like anything like that, I can see why it doesn't work for some people. It's totally cool that it didn't work for you. And you're damn right, they're going to make a lot of money off this. I mean, the Porgs, probably if you add up their entire screen time that they're on screen, probably comes in at about 2 minutes. Tops. If you take every second that a Porg is on screen in this movie, it probably maxes out at 2 minutes, if that. So, and I thought it added a nice layer to it. It made me smile and laugh and giggle at certain points of the film that I needed to smile and laugh and giggle. So, hey, to each their own. It didn't work for you. Totally cool. Worked for me, but you're right. It is going to make them an awful lot of money. You're totally right about that. Let's see. Sad7287 writes, too many characters to service in this trilogy? No, not really. I mean, there's not as many characters in this trilogy as there are in Avengers or anything like that. You had a number of characters. Some of them are key focal characters. Some of them are not. So, look, with all the problems that I have with the film, I don't think too many characters is one of them, especially when you can take your time over 3 films to address them in different ways. So I'm actually perfectly fine with it myself. Nate Piacentino writes, I made an audible squeal when I saw Yoda. You're not the only one, Nate. I mean, like I said before, the theater I was in, people were going crazy when Yoda showed up. Let's see here. Jake Walsh writes, hey, John, big fan from the Bay Area. I was wondering what you thought about the Battle of Crate. I thought everything we got was great, but I wanted a little bit more. What do you think? I think I'm with you on that. I think I loved it, but I could have used a little bit more. Yeah. With you, I'm completely on that. I think that is one of the things, again, take some more time away from that stupid casino planet and give it to a couple more of those other things. And I think I'm right with you there, Jake, on that. I think a little bit more time for that battle, give us a little bit more. I think that would have been a nice, better balance and given us a little bit more to cheer for. So I'm completely in agreement with you. Sign me up. I'm on board with you. Shivam Dixit writes, Rose has to be the most useless and unnecessary character. Her romance was so forced, and that kiss at the end. What in the world? I think you saw a different movie than I did, Shivam. I thought her character was great. She brought the heart to it. She represented, to me, what it was the Resistance was about. And that line she gives at the end almost choked me up. The line about, it's not about fighting against the things we hate. I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember it word for word. But in paraphrasing, it's not about fighting against what we hate. It's about fighting for the things we love. And that, there was something about that line. And you realize when you understand her outlook and what her and her sister's relationship was and the sacrifice of her sister and how she just has this pure, honest belief in the cause of the resistance, that when she said that line, I got chills. You can't, I don't know if you can see the hair on my arm is standing up now thinking about the line. It did. It gave me total chills. Was the kiss forced? No way. We saw from when she first meets Finn that she's a fangirl of Finn. She's already in love with him, even though she had never met him yet. For her to slip him that kiss, it would have been different if Finn slipped her the kiss. That would have been a little bit different. But her shooting in and giving him a kiss before she passes out, I thought that was totally consistent with the character. You don't like the character. Totally fine, and that's fair. But I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to stand on the opposite side of the aisle from you on this. I thought she was a great addition to the character. And her outlook on things was a really fresh dimension to, and gave us clairvoyance into what is the Resistance all about. It's not about just grim and dirty, we're fighting our enemy. It's about fighting for what they love. And that, to me, was the big send-off message of Rose in this movie. And the whole reason she was in that movie was to be the one that could give that line. And I, for one, ate it up. And not everybody did. That's totally fine. I'm not going to poo-poo on you or anybody else who didn't like it. That's great. I'm just saying for me it worked, and that's why. Joseph Rotini, as we round out now to the last couple of questions. Like The Last Jedi, but Poe/Finn's plan killed half the fleet? Yes. Yes, it did. And that's one of the things I love about this movie. That the heroes are flawed and make mistakes, even with the best of intentions. They made mistakes, and there were consequences for those mistakes. And that's one of the things I adored about this movie. You know, some people will criticize the Force Awakens as, you know, Rey's a Mary Sue. Like, everybody's perfect. Nobody makes mistakes. Everything is flawless about them. And now we come into this movie, and first of all, I think that was bullshit. If you really understand the first movie, none of them were Mary Sues. But you come into this movie now, and the characters are human. They think they're doing the right thing. They have the best, most pure motivations, but they make mistakes. And they make the wrong call. And when they do make the wrong call, there are consequences, and some people pay the price for it. And I thought that was one of the great things. That made it feel more real to me that they did that. So on that level, it worked great for me. But you're absolutely right, Joseph. Their plan led to the deaths of a lot of people. And the consequences were real, even though their motivation was pure and trying to do the right thing. And that's what happens. Sometimes you can have the right motivation, but you're doing the wrong thing, and you can make a mistake, and there are prices to pay when that happens. And we see that happens in The Last Jedi, and I love that part of it, personally. Jonathan Blazer writes, "Hey John, big fan for many years, but sending questions for the first time today. Great flying Leia, yay or nay, took me out of the film." Again, I think it's, if Leia was standing on a balcony and just flew through the air amongst the trees, that's one thing. But remember, she's in the vacuum of space. I explained this earlier. All it takes is a slight nudge like that, and she would just go sailing effortlessly. For her to use even the most basic amount of force power to tug on something, to pull her into the ship, no problem. To me, the bigger question is, how did the Force keep her alive in space? That's the bigger question to me that I hope they address in Episode 9. Karthik Rao writes, "Huge fan from India." Thank you so much, Karthik. Thought Leia in space was so stupid, and a guy in my theater yelled, "I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!" I would have died. See, I like the scene, but if I was in a theater where somebody yelled that, I would have lost my shit. That's hilarious. "I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!" I totally would have lost my mind. I thought, that's awesome. That is awesome that somebody said that. Master Juang. Oh, geez, I lost Master Juang. You know what? I just realized there's a whole hell of a lot more questions here that I'm going to be able to get to because I'm running out of my 2-hour time limit. So here's what I'm going to do, guys. I'm going to wrap this thing up now. And I'm going to make a separate video, pre-recorded video, to address all the remaining questions that you guys sent in here. I will make a part 2 to this video. It won't be live. I'm going to do a part 2 to this video and have it up later tonight. I'll have that up later tonight. I'm going to have the spoiler review and discussion part 2. I'll put that up later tonight. But this video is, we're getting on 2 hours here, so we're going to have to wrap this one up. So with all that out of the way, guys, I've had a lot of fun doing this. And you know what? Again, the great thing about these things is that we're all film fans. We have different points of view. Some of you love this movie a lot more than I do. Some of you dislike it more than I do. Some of you have things you don't agree with me not liking certain parts of the movie. Some of you disagree with me liking certain parts of the movie. That's the best part of being a film fan. I kid you not, guys. My favorite part about being a film fan is sitting here and taking discussions and interaction from you guys with different points of view and being able to address them together. I love it. And I hope you've enjoyed this as well. I know I have. And guys, that will do it for this part 1 of the spoiler review of The Last Jedi. Thanks so much for hanging in here with me for the last couple of hours. This has been a lot of fun. Don't forget, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure you click the thumbs up button. Leave your thoughts and observations in the comment section below. Remember, we're all film fans together. Let's be respectful of each other, even if we have different points of view. And make sure you follow me on social media, simply at John Campea. That will do it for me for now, guys. Part 2 of this video will be up later tonight. That'll do it for me. My name is John Campea, and until my next video in part 2, bye-bye.